Hello and welcome along to another manager special from the Honest Football Podcast. This time we're back at Bristol City for the second time in just over a week, as they have appointed Nigel Pearson as their manager till the end of the season. Now, ironically, considering Nigel Pearson's linked with almost every championship job, this has somehow managed to come as a bit of a surprise. So we'll talk about that in a moment. But firstly, we normally cover the outgoing man. We don't need to on this occasion, because we did our very own dedicated Dean Holden episode. So you can catch up with that in the eye above. We'll get Craig's thoughts later because he wasn't there on that day. But aside from that, it's all about Nigel Pearson today. And Craig, you're going to have to accept my apologies because I've got to ask Charlie the first question, despite it being your turn.
That's fine. Go on.
Because Charlie, we have done a number of championship specials this year. I'm thinking of Sheffield Wednesday. I'm thinking of a return to Derby. I'm thinking of being wrong to be sacked from Watford to start with at the end of the Premier League season. I'm thinking about Bournemouth, where even the fans wanted him in. It is the first championship special that you didn't even mention Nigel Pearson. None of the fans mentioned Nigel Pearson, and it's the one he's turned up at. So how do you feel?
I'm bemused. I'm genuine. I'm not just saying. I know we're sort of joshing a bit, but of all the jobs that he was linked to, this is the least Nigel Pearson needed job. If I'm honest, all right. I know they're struggling, but they're mid-table. Let's be honest, they're not going to get relegated. I don't understand really. His specialism is maybe taking a club that's struggling, near the relegation, and then somehow like Phoenix and the Flames bring them up. He did it at Leicester, classic example. I don't really see that as this sort of job really. Bristol City they've got some good players. They started the season well, as we alluded to before. I don't think they needed a special. Nigel Pearson has a special set of skills. At reviving a club who are on its last legs. That's not Bristol City. They're just going for a bad spell. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think they needed to get him in, but we'll obviously talk a bit more about that in the future. Yeah, out of all the ones that we've spoken about, I'm amazed that this is the one that he's actually got, because I think it's the least Nigel Pearson needed one that was going, to be honest.
And coming over to you, Craig, I think the thing that's probably most interesting for you, based on what you've said about the caretakers in recent prediction shows, is that he's not actually brought his backroom staff with him, which he often does. Now, I know a lot of his former ones are actually in other jobs now, but does it seem strange that he's coming in on his own, given the way the club's going, and perhaps it needed fresh momentum? Is Nigel Pearson on his own enough for that?
Well, it's a bit of a strange one. I said, he had obviously his own backroom staff from obviously previous club, like Craig Shakespeare, for example. Obviously, he's at another club now. I don't know. Maybe he just feels like he can trust Paul Simpson because they've got good experience. But my worry is they've already lost another game when them two were in charge. So it has to be a whole change of the philosophy of the squad, the playing, how they play, all that stuff. And with M2 still being there, it'd probably be the same type of training. And I feel that's a bit of a strange move.
No, I completely agree with you, to be honest. I guess the mitigating circumstance for that, Charlie, is the fact that it's only till the end of the season. Now, they've sort of described it as a bit of a trial period, with both parties being open to extending it if it goes well. But is that perhaps the reason why there's not been more of a financial commitment in terms of staffing as well?
Yeah, but again, I go back to that point. I completely agree. In terms of financial thing, I suppose, given what's happening, it makes sense. But why Nigel Pearson to the end of the season? As I say, they're not a team that are just outside the playoffs that, he's got experience of getting teams promoted. He would be ideal if they were a point off and the manager had left because he's gone to the Premier League or something like that, or they were just outside the relegation zone, but they're just sort of floating mid-table. That's why I don't understand why he's just there to the end of the season. Either have the investment of giving him the full sort of reign over the club for the next 2 years, and I think he could do a good job there if he was to do that, or get someone in who's a bit more like I keep mentioning Paul Cook, but someone like that who give them an opportunity. This is a bit of a free hit for whoever goes in there, to be brutally honest. So that's why I don't understand this 3 or 4 month contract. It's very bizarre setup. But I don't want to cast aspersions. Bristol City's setup has been quite bizarre this season, hasn't it, in terms of the way they've addressed manager and recruitment issues. So it's not a surprise to me, but it still doesn't make it any less strange than what it already is.
And Craig, I guess one of the things we've got to look at moving forward is, as Charlie says, they're 10 points off the bottom 3. They're 10 points off the playoffs. Realistically, barring a miracle like we saw with Mick McCarthy so far at Cardiff, they're not going to be near either. So why is it only a short-term deal outside financial reasons? Can you think of any others?
I think it's more or less just to steady the ship and then see how it goes for the rest of the season. But what we've kind of noticed is the 2 former assistant managers that have taken over as managers have both been sacked now this season. So the other one was Sir Jason Tindall at Bournemouth. So it proves that, to be honest, the chairman's made a mistake. To be fair, I think it's more of a safe bet picking Nigel Pearson in now to assess the squad, who he thinks is not good enough, and then hopefully come summer, where obviously we think they'll stay in the championship anyway. We know that, for example. And he thought, right, I'll get rid of this player, and I'm going to bring this type of player and this type of player, this type of player. But you've got to remember, they didn't bring many players in during last summer. They got rid of a load of players, but they didn't bring many players in. So I think it's only 3 permanent signings and 3 loan signings. So maybe the squad might need to be a bit bigger. I don't know.
I know I don't normally ask the questions, but this is something that's been bugging me about this appointment is what is deemed a success? Because obviously you said to the end of the season, and then they'll review. What would be a success? What would be a failure? Do you know what I'm getting at? Like, aside from relegation or promotion, how do you deem... And if that's... like, I completely agree with what you were saying, Craig, 100%, that, you know, if he comes in and he can bring in these players and all of that, but then they haven't really given him the contract to do that, have they? Do you know what I'm saying? It seems so bizarre. I completely agree that he is the right man to do that, and he should do that. But if it's only contract to the end of the season, what would earn him that next one, or what would make it get taken off the table?
Anything higher up, obviously, than 15th at the moment is a success. So,
well, stopping the rot isn't it now?
Well, yeah, it's literally getting the first win. Looking at their fixtures, who knows when that will happen? But yeah, it's a hard one for Bristol City at the moment where they are. But obviously, they've got to find a few ways to obviously stop the rot first.
Absolutely, and we'll talk about what we think might happen in the summer afterwards. But Charlie, the next one for you, and probably most importantly that Craig's just mentioned, is where is the next result coming from? Because in the next 3 games, it's Middlesbrough, Swansea away, which we know is a 2-0 defeat automatically, and Bournemouth at home. Then QPR are in great form, and it's not really till the 5th game that they face Birmingham, a side where at the moment you'd probably consider them favourites, is it?
No, that's true. However, I think Nigel Pearson is probably a bit more astute. I think he'll try and play for a draw in quite a few of those, and you pick up, say, 3 or 4 points out of those 5 games. Actually, is not the worst result given who they're playing. Maybe sneak a 1-0 win against one of them. Suddenly you're on 7 points. It looks quite good for him. I think personally, looking at our predictions and that, we've been led a bit of a false sort of thing because we said about this amazing start they made, but actually now looking back retrospectively, the first game was against Coventry City at home, and Coventry's away form all season has been fairly ropey. You know, Stoke City, who have been all over the shop, Sheffield Wednesday at the time, who were in all manner of trouble, and Nottingham Forest, who at the time again were also struggling. So they were the first 4 games, and we thought, Bristol City are doing well, this, that, and the other. The next win didn't come for another 6 games after that. So I think we've probably, as fans and people who watch the Championship and other people who watch it, have been a bit of a false dawn of Bristol City. Maybe they are just a mid-table team. So for him to go out and just try and draw their way through the rest of the season is probably not the worst tactic. So actually, out of that, when they go to Borough today, I'm expecting, to set up, get as many in behind the ball and play for a draw and just build from there. So, but I think he's a good manager at doing that. He's tactically astute. And then, as we alluded to earlier, you'd like to think he'd push on next season, but is he going to get the job next season? Who knows?
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. We'll finish off this season with one final question, Craig, which is, obviously he's got a lot of young players in the squad. You mentioned previously about the perhaps lack of overhaul, promoting a few from within, which is something that a lot of clubs are looking to do now. But going towards the end of the season, is Nigel Pearson's probably main job, or maybe once something he'll be judged on off the pitch, how he develops the younger players and if he can create more consistency from them, because particularly going forward, it's a very young front line.
Yeah, it's a very young front line, and just look at the stats. They haven't actually scored quite a lot of goals. Diadu up top, obviously his contract runs out at the end of the season. He's top goal scorer in the champion, like in the league, with 6 goals, and then Naki Wells on that 5. That's not good enough, really. The problem is they leak in goals as well, and they've got quite good experienced players in the defence as well. You've got Kalash, you've got Alfie Mawson, Maranatha as well. Good experience, Premier League experience as well. It's all good promoting youth within, but also they've still got to be good enough, and they do need that experienced players around them as well. Like Tariq Pattinson, for example. We know Tariq Pattinson from Luton when he was in the youth team. They signed him when he was young. So obviously they do believe in in youth. So it's trying to find the blend of working around them. So, but you can't rely everything on youth. Yeah, you do need that experience around them, but obviously it's the right experienced players that works with them.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned a couple of the attacking players who have perhaps been a bit out of favour, who I wouldn't be shocked to see popping back into the team a little bit soon. But Charlie, we've got to move on to the summer, because that's probably the biggest debate that's come out of this appointment, is what's going to happen after the season. Now, as Craig and you have mentioned earlier on, I would imagine he's going to get to the end of the season. He's assessed the squad. He says, this is what we need. This is what we need to get rid of. This is what I need. And based on his demands there, is that the point at which Bristol City, based on their recent track record, decide whether that's affordable, whether that's possible, or whether they go for a different option?
Yeah, I think so. But I think if you're going to have Nigel Pearson, you've got what's the best way of putting this? you've got to have ambition if you're going to employ him. So I think if you're going to look at that in the summer, I'm not saying, everything that he says you need to do, because obviously that will just get, potentially spiral into financial issues. But the point I'm getting at is, if they're going to take him on, you have to take on that you've got someone with ambition. He's someone who's a proven track record, regardless what you think of, stuff off the pitch and stuff. He's a proven track record of playing good football and getting teams up into the Premier League in theory, but, getting teams promoted and building a legacy. I mean, let's be honest, I don't want to go into a different debate, but the whole thing of Leicester winning the league started off with Nigel Pearson in a sense. That foundation of that squad was his. So what I'm getting at is, if you're going to take him in the summer, you have to back him completely or not at all, because then you end up with, almost like we were saying, in a different manager one, I haven't named the team. He's going to have high demands on his players. He's that sort of manager that he can be quite stout and assertive. So if you don't back him, then there's no point in having him. So he's not a wishy-washy manager. So in that basis, if you're going to do that, and he says, right, this is what we need, I think there have to be sensible and go, right, we'll either do this 100% and go 100% with you, or unfortunately we'll part ways. Who they're getting instead then, I don't know, because if it doesn't work with Nigel Pearson, who is it going to work with? Do you know what I mean? You end up with, just not in a disrespectful way, maybe another Dean Holden, a bit of a sort of state that they're in at the minute, and just floating around mid-table. It's what your expectations are for that season, I suppose.
Obviously, Bristol City last two managers, Dean Holden and Lee Johnson. When Lee Johnson started at Bristol City, he didn't have much managerial experience, and obviously nor does Dean Holden. Obviously, this was his first main job, so they've completely gone the opposite way of finding someone that with a lot of experience. So that might work well, and probably a lot different to what obviously the previous two managers have. But don't get me wrong, Lee Johnson's done a fantastic job at Bristol City in his time. It just got, at the end, just got a bit stale. And obviously with Dean Holden, which, as I said about previous, like assistant managers taking over as manager, it doesn't work, in my opinion. The same club, just does not work. So yeah, they flipped the script. They've gone for someone with experience, who knows how to obviously run a team, knows how to get players motivated. And I think it could work. And I think it's a safe, for me, it's a safe bet doing to the end of the season, because then there's no pressure. For me, him to the end of the season is a safe bet. And then, all right, we're finished there. We know you're going to get the job come July. It's a 2-year contract, for example. And right, let's build this team then.
Yeah, and absolutely. And as you say, Craig, as he's proven at Leicester, if he's given a long time, he will build a side that can compete for promotion and potentially keep them up in the Premier League if they get there. So a bit suspiciously, I'm in complete agreement with you, which is somewhat of a concern for me. But let's get on to the final question. And I'm going to ask it in two parts this time, because we've obviously got two issues to address. So the first one, and I'll come to Charlie first. This season, whereabouts do you see Bristol City finishing? And do you think Nigel Pearson is a good appointment for them?
I think it's a good appointment. I think, the issues they've had in terms of up front, I suppose that's a bit of a longer thing to address, but I think he can sort out the defensive issues. They concede so many goals in the last 20 minutes of a game. So that's something that, like I mentioned, about the demands, hopefully he'd have that on them, and you'd be almost too scared to lose concentration those last 20 minutes when you're playing for Nigel Pearson in that sense. I think he's the right appointment. I suppose what it is, to sum up, I was disappointed that it wasn't given to, I'm not saying Paul Cook, but someone lower down. I think this was a great opportunity for like you even mentioned about Lee Johnson, Craig, but not necessarily someone who's inexperienced, but someone who's not managed at this level before. Yeah, okay, he's a good appointment, but I think there was other ones that I'd have been a bit more excited about, and I think they'll stay roughly where they are. I can't see them doing a late surge for the playoffs, and I think they'll get too many draws to not go down.
What you said there about bringing someone up, I think that's a bit of a risk, especially during the season. It is, like, if you approach them at the end of the season, yeah, that'd be fine. But we've seen it before with someone like lower up, went to a higher club. It didn't work. Look at Nathan Jones. It didn't work for him.
I agree. I think Nathan Jones was a slightly different squad and different situation. He had massive earners from the Premier League who he had to try and sort out and work around. I think Bristol City's...
But when you have someone that's been like League One or League Two, for example, two like former Premier League players, that's the hard bit. Yeah. So yeah, I think if you're going to get someone from the lower leagues, I would personally do it in the summer.
I see what you're saying. I just think otherwise we end up on this merry-go-round that we always talk about, and you end up employing the same managers unless you go down, and that's... Yeah, anyway, that's another debate, I suppose, for another time. Personally, I would like to have seen someone down from there, but he'll be a steady appointment and he'll keep them where they are, I think, personally.
Yeah, and I guess some of the appointments like the Nathan Jones, whether or not it's a similar situation, are the ones that are probably starting to put these clubs off now, unfortunately, indirectly as it is. Moving back to you, Craig, obviously the rest of the season, I think we're all in agreement that Nigel Pearson's probably a solid appointment. I mean, the fact Charlie's not excited about him is an absolutely mind-boggling situation based on the rest of the season. But what do you think for the rest of the year? Are they going to move up, down, or stay roughly where they are?
Obviously, we've covered the Championship a lot this season, and I generally don't see, I think we kind of know what our top 8 is. I think the top 8 at the moment is what it kind of is, what we expect to be come the end of the season. Sorry. I think it'll be 13th, really, to be honest. I don't think anything special. I think it's just literally a free hit for Nigel Pearson. It is a safe and solid appointment.
No, fair enough. And then I guess the second question, and the final one that I'll ask, is do you think, coming to you first again, Charlie, that Nigel Pearson will be at Bristol City at the start of next season? That is the final one, and that's the one that the fans probably want to know. So what's your thought?
If I knew what the thresholds were, I could answer a lot easier. But no, on a serious note, yeah, I think he will be. But to be honest, I think whoever was in there, and aside from me or me managing them, I think, to be honest, anyone who went in there would keep them mid-table, and I think they would have got the job over the summer. So yeah, I think he'll be there in the summer because I don't really know what he can do wrong.
So then, based on that, next season will they be a success?
Yeah, if they back him, yeah. If they back him, then the investment, yeah. But I think he can be an abrasive character and he has high demand, so it's going to be a bit of a clash. But yeah, I think if they back him, then yes. But I can't say I have the confidence that they will do.
Fair enough. And Craig, same to you. Will Nigel Pearson? I think you've probably indicated your thoughts already. Will Nigel Pearson be in charge next year? And to avoid me asking you a second question, will he be a success next year if he's there?
Well, first of all, yes, I think he'll be there next season. Will he be a success next season? No.
I did not expect that.
No, here we are, because I don't think it's going to happen over 1 year, in my opinion. I think he needs, if he gets given a time, I think probably the second season, maybe, he can really, I think he will challenge, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it will end in success. I think Bristol City, is a club that could potentially reach the Premier League. Look at the stadium, Ashton Gate, obviously it's been renovated. It now looks fantastic. It will be a Premier League ground, hopefully in the future. But I don't think it'll be next season though. I think it will challenge for the playoffs next season. They'll be tipped to challenge in the playoffs if Nigel Pearson's in charge. But yeah, I don't think it'll be next season. I think probably the season after.
I guess I can't sit on the fence. It would be rude of me to do so after making you two give your opinions for 15 or 20 minutes. I'm going to say that Bristol City, and this will be the surprise for you, are going to run the playoffs quite close this season, because after the first few games, they've got a relatively winnable set of fixtures. And we've seen, if you get that lucky bounce, like Mick McCarthy when he started at Cardiff, they came back from 2 behind the first game and then they were flying. So I don't think they're going to get in the playoffs, but I think they'll be within 3 or 4 points. So that's my wild prediction. And you know what I'm going to be guessing for Bristol City in the next 5 match days. But either way, Nigel Pearson will be there next year. I think we're all in agreement of that. And it's just what level of success they're going to have. But it will make next year's pre-season championship predictions very, very interesting. So if you did enjoy this episode, please do put a thumbs up on the video. If you're a Bristol City fan, please do let us know down below what you think of the Nigel Pearson appointment. And of course, if you didn't in the other video, please do check out what we said about the Dean Holden sacking. Subscribe to the channel for regular content from the podcast. And you can follow us over on Twitter at HonestFootball3. Thank you to Craig and Charlie for joining me as always. And hopefully we'll see you next time.